this topic, I'm going to talk to you about interaction design. If you remember, in the previous two topics, we talked about information design, and I used the house analogy where kitchen objects were positioned in different parts of the house. Well, interaction design, it's about the way you interact with the objects, the dials, the handles, and the sliders for the kitchen objects in your house. Let's look at an example of an online website. So I'm just going to draw a very crude drawing. So interaction design, it's about deciding how the user interacts with the features and content you have on your website. Maybe your website has a search feature, and you will typically put it on the top right corner, but you might want to put it somewhere else. Your website might have menus, and the user can hover over the menu so they can actually access the information on the website. Your website might have a carousel being something that supports a limited, space you have on your website. So you can still scroll through pieces of information by going left and right. Maybe you have a list on your website and you want the user to be able to scroll to get to the information that's not visible. Or maybe you have a feature on your website where the user gets to drag and drop things from one window to another. Now, this is just one example of how your website could look. It's not about inventing features and functionality. There's a lot of examples out there that you can use, but it's about deciding the most appropriate interaction to use for that piece of content. Now, let's look at a specific example. I'm sure there have been many times on a website where you've had to select a date. On a website, you might have to select your date by actually typing the numbers, followed by hashes. There are other websites that allow you to click on a little picture of a calendar or an icon and pop up a calendar where you can navigate to months and dates and years. And if you look at your smartphone, for example, your iPhone, sometimes selecting the date is about that sort of rolling carousel effect where you can select a date, month, and a year. These are all examples of different interaction designs that do the same thing. In this case, selecting a date. And the previous example about the date picker is very specific to one single interaction. But you also have to consider the bigger interaction of the website. So, here's another example. Imagine you're designing the search feature of your website. In example one, you might take the approach where the user enters one search field and gets the search results and have the ability to actually configure or filter the information to refine the search results. But in the second option, you might decide, well, I'm going to get the user to define all the search criteria up front, and then I'm going to give him the search results. So this gives you an example that interaction design is not just about the specific control of one feature, but also encompasses the overall experience. You have to consider both levels when you're designing. Some practitioners get a bit nervous when it comes to interaction design. I think it's because they feel like they need to reinvent from scratch. But often the best practice is use existing examples of websites and stick to things people already know how to use. So I talked about the date picker as an example. People understand how to enter text or use a slider to pick a date picker. So unless it's really important for you to design something from scratch, consider reappropriating one of those functionalities. Now, I'm going to talk to you about some of the techniques that you could use to help you with your interaction design. First one is desktop research. So as I mentioned before, you should have a look at what others are doing in the space and make sure you can reappropriate that sort of functionality if it suits your website. Another one is called brainstorming or design brainstorming. And the whole idea is to come up with as much features and functionality and designs as possible, and then rule out the ones that you don't think are going to work. Another really important technique is collaboration, or doing collaborative design. You know, multiple brains are better than one. So if you can get some colleagues or friends to come together and to brainstorm and collaborate on some of your features and functionality, you're going to get a wider choice of designs you can choose from. And finally, low and high-fi fidelity prototypes or wireframes. I'm going to talk about low-fi or low-fidelity wireframes in the next topic. But basically, this is the level of refinement of the designs. Low fidelity is often a bit more crude, designs are unresolved, whereas high fidelity has more detail, has the information, and it's all about validating if the design works. So in this topic, we've talked about interaction design. The idea being helping the user to interact with the features and functionality and the content of your website, and the fact that there's many different ways you can approach it. I've also talked about one of the techniques, but some are listed here. I'm going to talk about low fidelity wireframing in the next topic.